Hi, this is TJR, and I'm here with my big sister, CB.
Hi.
And we last got together when we discussed the Star Trek pilot episode, The Cage. And we are going to do another one of these, a different theme, though. The Mary Poppins Returns movie, the sequel to the original Mary Poppins film from Walt Disney Productions, is coming out in less than a month as we record this. And I was rewatching the film, the original film, with my mother, and thought it might be an interesting idea to discuss the differences between the film, the classic film, and the books that it's based on. And that's why I got my big sister here, because she knows these books pretty well. How old would you say we were when you read them?
Well, I certainly read them before the movie came out. Movie came out in 1964 when I would have been 12.
Uh-huh.
And I wouldn't have seen it in the theaters because we couldn't afford to go to movies.
That's right, we couldn't.
And so I suppose it played on TV sometime. I would have read the books well before that, because I remember before I was 12, when I was much younger, reading the first Mary Poppins book. And it was one of the first times when I was aware of the playful use of language. In the movie, Mr. Banks is a banker. In the book, he's named Mr. Banks, but you don't really know where he works. He goes to the city and works in an office, making money. He sits at his desk all day, cutting out shillings and sixpences and pound notes, and brings them home. And I just thought this was very humorous. And I went and told my mother about this because it was so funny. I wanted to share it. And she just looked at me kind of blankly and said, "Did they catch him?" She thought he was a counterfeiter. And that's when I realized that bookish people kind of live in two different worlds. So I was pretty young when I read at least the first book. I don't know when I read the other two books, Mary Poppins Comes Back and Mary Poppins Opens the Door. And those were the three that I knew and owned. She wrote more books after that, but I wasn't aware of them. They weren't in our public library.
Uh-huh.
But I have read them since, but only once.
Okay.
So I'm not as familiar with them.
And how many times do you think you've seen the movie?
Oh, I really don't know, but it's one of my favorite movies.
Okay.
I love musicals, and Mary Poppins is one of my favorite musicals.
Mm-hmm.
It is unlike the book in many ways, but I love it anyhow.
I have to admit, this is a movie that I did not see until I was well into my adult years. In fact, I didn't see it until somewhere around the early mid-2000s.
Wow.
It was a movie that I avoided actually seeing. I don't know why I had this, even though, first of all, when you're a teenager, I probably thought I was too cool for it. This is a kid's film, or this is a chick film. And then as I got older, of course, you hear everybody saying, oh, what a great film it is. It's a classic and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, it's probably a good film, but I still, for whatever reason, just am trying to avoid seeing it. And of course, I saw it. And once I saw it, I thought, wow, now I see why it's such a classic. When I saw the trailer for the new movie, I became intrigued and said, I'm going to rewatch the original, and thus the idea to do this little discussion that we're about to embark on here. I think I'm just going to start here with the opening sequence. We've got, of course, that beautiful aerial shot of London, which is done with a matte painting.
Yes, and it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, yes. Matte painting technology, of course, we've replaced all that now with CGI. But matte painting technology is beautiful to look at. If you've not watched a whole lot of old movies, which a lot of people on the internet haven't, I've noticed. People on the internet think old movies are from the 80s. But if you've not watched a lot of special effect films that have lots of special effects, which Mary Poppins does have, you're not used to seeing matte paintings. And it's a really beautiful art form, the use of them in motion pictures to create huge scenic landscapes. And anyways, but it opens with that. We see Mary Poppins up in the clouds.
Right.
And then we come down to London where we meet Bert, played by Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah.
So I want to first, I know you've got some observations about this sequence. The first thing I just want to say is we see Bert. He's performing for a crowd. He's playing music for a group of onlookers, trying to get some tips. And of course, he does canter in anything, which is I can relate to being a musician. It's very hard to get paid. It's very hard to get paid as a musician. Let's talk about Bert. Now, is he in the books?
Well, yes, but the character Bert in the movie is an amalgam of several characters in the books.
Okay.
But the one in the book who is named Bert, he's a matchman. He sells matches when the weather is rainy, and he does sidewalk art when the weather is fine.
Uh-huh.
There are other characters kind of similar to him in the books, and they just kind of smooshed them all together and made him a jack of all trades.
I see.
And I think that was a good move on Disney's part.
In the film, very early on, Bert breaks the fourth wall and he talks to the audience.
He does. And I had forgotten about that. I just watched the movie the day after you watched it with Mom. And I had forgotten about that part. And it kind of shocked me at first. And then I realized, the book opens that way.
Uh-huh.
The book, the author addresses the reader. The author says, if you want to find Cherry Tree Lane, all you have to do is ask the policeman at the crossroads. He will push his helmet slightly to one side, scratch his head thoughtfully, and then he will point his huge white-gloved finger and say, first to your right, second to your left, sharp right again, and you're there. Good morning. The author takes you, down the lane and finding number 17 and kind of introduces you to the house, which is shabbier than the others because Mr. Banks told Mrs. Banks when they were married she could either have a nice house or 4 children, and she chose the 4 children. And so you come into it with a broken fourth wall in the book, too. That surprised me. And you open with this scene with Bert, and he's doing his one-man band, and he does a little rhyme for various people in the audience, and I realized, gosh, a lot of these people, they took the names of the people out of the books.
Uh-huh.
For instance, Mrs. Corey, the tiny little elderly woman with the 2 enormously tall daughters, she has her own chapter in the book. In the book, she's extremely old, She was in her teens when the world was created. She bullies her tall daughters who are terrified of her. She sells gingerbread in her shop. She breaks off her fingers and gives them to you to eat. Sometimes they're barley sugar. Sometimes they're peppermint bars. She says sometimes she eats her own fingers when they're peppermint bars because it settles her stomach.
I'm beside myself hearing this. This is wild.
Yeah.
This is to me a very WTF moment to hear this because I've not read these books. They say she's been there since the beginning of time?
Well, she was in her teens when the world was created. She remembers, people like William the Conqueror and so on. She's just tossing this off in conversation when Mary Poppins and the children are in her gingerbread shop.
This is something I want to ask. You brought up a point that I want to ask about. In this film, Mary Poppins is obviously a magical character. She has abilities that other people don't. Bert also is a magical character, and he seems to have some history with Mary Poppins. He alludes to it a number of times, that they've had a history together. But they seem to be the only magical characters, except for the Uncle Albert who floats.
Yes. But
we don't see other people being at all fantastical like you're describing now with some of these background characters.
Well, there are a lot more of those in the books. A lot of them are Mary Poppins' relatives.
Okay.
But some aren't.
Yeah, I kept wondering what the relationship is between Bert and Mary Poppins. I keep wondering, are they related in some way? Are they not related? Of course, there was a part where he says, he says to her, you're as lovely as the day I first met you. And it just has this implication that was a very, very long time ago. Uh-huh.
Well, that's both in the book and in the movie. They admire each other a good deal. And in the book especially, in the second chapter, which the Jolly Holidays segment of the movie is based on. Uh-huh. Mary goes out on her day off and meets Bert, who's doing his sidewalk art.
Yeah.
And she says, have you forgotten? It's my day off. And he says, oh, I'm sorry. I've only earned 2pence today. I can't take you out to tea. So apparently he's sort of like her fella, but not. Uh-huh. There's no romantic relationship between them exactly, but there's one of admiration. Travers, the author, was very adamant with Disney that there should not be any romance between Bert and Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
He's a perfect gentleman, and she considers herself a perfect lady.
Yes.
They enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
He's not a relative. He's not exactly magic, except, certainly in the movie he's not. In the book, there's a very ambiguous bit in that chapter where they have their jolly holiday together and they go into the chalk painting, which it's just the two of them. It's not the children in the book. It's almost as if he pulls her into the painting.
Yeah.
But maybe it wouldn't have happened if Mary hadn't been there.
Okay. Because I was wondering, when you said he's not magic, it's like, well, didn't he like make the chalk paintings that they can walk into?
He made the chalk paintings, but it was Mary who took them into the paintings in the movie.
Okay.
He's kind of like, to me, in the movie, he's goading her into taking them into the paintings, because he tells the kids, okay, then I'll do it. And he does this little rigmarole and they jump and nothing happens. And she says, oh, why do you try to make everything so complicated? And they hold hands.
That does happen.
They zip right into the paintings.
That's right. They don't actually jump in until she actually does something about it. But he knows she's magical. But there does seem to be like they've known each other a very long time.
Yes.
And when I watched the trailer for the new film, I believe it's the character of Bert, played by a different actor.
I think...
And it's Lin-Manuel Miranda who wrote Hamilton, the musical, who's playing this character. I'm assuming he's playing the part of Bert. I suppose I should look it up on IMDb.
I think he's playing a different character.
Okay. This is TJR. After making this video, we discovered that, in fact, the character that Lin-Manuel Miranda plays in the new Mary Poppins Returns movie is not Bert. It is a completely different character. We don't know too much about the character at this point because the film hasn't come out yet. But the fact that he resembled the character of Bert made me suspect that it would be the same character. And then, of course, the scene that he apparently had not aged also made me conclude that Bert, within the context of these movies, was a more fantastical, more magical character. A notion that my sister dispels very quickly. Let's get back to the program. So we meet Bert. He breaks the fourth wall. We meet the eccentric neighbor who has a cannonball on his roof.
Oh yes, Admiral Boom.
Admiral Boom. Yeah, he has the cannon on the roof, and it looks like a ship. And
that's in the book.
That's in the book too. Okay.
They don't have the rigmarole with his house is shaking whenever he sets off the cannon. That's not in there.
Although that's a good visual gag for the film.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah, I think it works probably something that wouldn't work in a book, but does work in a movie because it provides a lot of good visual gags. And then we meet the Banks, and now we find out early on about Mrs. Banks being part of the women's suffrage movement.
And that's only in the movie.
Only in the movie, okay. Now, was that Disney trying to be topical, do you think? During the 60s, 64, were we starting to see the women's movement of the 60s at that point? Or was that later 60s?
Probably. I have to admit my memories of the 60s are a little vague because I was reading a book.
Okay.
And I wasn't paying attention to current events. But
I was busy being a kid.
Yeah. Mary Poppins is not a book you could make a movie of. But it's definitely a book on which you could base a movie. And basing a movie on a book is something Disney was very good at.
Yeah.
I think Mary Poppins is one of the best examples of that. The book does not have an overall story arc. Mary Poppins blows in one day after the children have driven away their current nanny.
Yeah.
She takes over. Each chapter is a different story.
A
magical adventure. There's no overall story arc. Except that she says, when Michael asks her the first night, will you stay with us always? She says, I'll stay until the wind changes. And when the wind changes at the end of the book, she leaves. Disney knew that in a movie, he needed an overall story arc.
Yeah.
And one that would appeal to American audiences.
Yeah.
So his story arc is, we have a nice family, but they are somewhat dysfunctional. The parents don't pay too much attention to the children. I think they made the mother a suffragette because that would be an absorbing cause for her.
It would keep her away from her children.
And she's busy with that.
Yes, and it does seem to do that to her in the film.
The father is absorbed in his work. He's not a bad man. The mother is not a bad mother or a bad woman, but they're just kind of absorbed in their own worlds, which I guess is maybe kind of British. I always thought it was weird that upper-class Brits sent their kids off to boarding school at astonishingly young ages. It just seems... So, Mary Poppins comes to heal the family.
And is that the case in the book as well?
No.
Okay, wild.
Yeah. Mr. Banks is not totally absorbed in his work. He's actually kind of a nice guy. The mother is nice, but she's, I guess, like other upper-class mothers, she does have a nanny. Mm-hmm. So she's not doing all the day-to-day stuff with her children. That's what you have a nanny for. Mm-hmm. And she's a little bit intimidated by Mary Poppins.
Really?
Yeah, because Mary Poppins always seems to know more about how the best people do things than the mother does. For instance, Mary Poppins comes in, it's the mother who's hiring her in the book, and the mother asks for references, and Mary Poppins says, I never give references, which she does in the movie also.
Yes.
But she says, none of the best people, none of the up-to-date people ask for references. And the mother says, oh, well then in that case, we won't bother with them. I only asked because I thought maybe you required it.
There we go.
So Mary Poppins can, do whatever she wants with her just by intimidating her.
Okay. Speaking of which, I love that scene where she is interviewed by the husband in the film, and she just literally in seconds puts him in his place and basically just runs rings around him, verbally.
Well, he's flabbergasted because she's got the reconstructed advertisement which his children wrote,
yes,
and which he tore up and threw in the fireplace.
Yes.
It's a wonderful scene. He's just perplexed.
Yeah.
And she's obviously in command of the situation, and then she says, maybe I'd better give you a 1-week trial.
Exactly. I'll give you a 1-week trial and see what I think.
Yeah.
I love how she just completely just turns the tables on him because he believes he's so in control of everything, and then she comes along and just completely takes control of the situation and turns everything around and makes him think it was his idea.
Yeah.
Of course.
Which is a very traditionally womanly thing to do as well.
Okay. It's okay.
His wife does that too.
It's true. She does. So let's talk about Mary Poppins herself, the character. Now, I've done a little bit I haven't read any of the books, but I have, from what I understand, Disney softened the character a bit.
He did. And the author was not terribly pleased with that because she's a lot sweeter and softer. She's a no-nonsense nanny in the books, and you can never get her to admit that anything magical has happened. Mm-hmm. If one of the children at the end of a chapter refers to something in their magical adventure, she sort of draws herself up and says, "What? Mm-hmm. What did you say to me? I have never been so insulted in my life. How could you imply that a respectable person like myself, a magical adventure might be about to start, and they ask too many questions? They've learned to just shut up and follow Mary Poppins because otherwise she might take them home and nothing magical will happen."
Good thinking. That if I was a kid, I'd do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, once I knew that, I might go home, I'd rather just stay on the adventure. There are hints of her being strict with the children in the movie. There are certain ways that she talks to them in strict tones, but I understand that in the book she is a lot stricter and even a little bit. Do I want to say cruel? Do I want to say
no? You don't want to say cruel. Mary Poppins is she's stern, she's strict, she's no nonsense, but she's tender, but doesn't want to show it.
Okay.
And there are certain points in the books where she is very tender, and the children get nervous. Especially towards the end of the book, because there's usually some softness and tenderness that they're not used to. And does that mean Mary Poppins is going to leave? Because in the first 3 books, she comes, she leaves. The next book, she comes, she leaves.
Yeah.
The following books after that, it's not coming and leaving anymore. They are just stories that took place in the chronology of the other books.
Now, let's also just talk about the 2 kids a little bit. The 2 kids in the film, and I'm sorry I haven't looked up their names, as the young actors who portrayed them at that time, they seem to me just very typical of Disney movies at the time.
Yeah, I think so. And I believe that the girl and the boy had appeared in another Disney movie before this.
Okay.
I don't remember which one.
Okay. They have that look. There was just a certain look to Disney periods of that time, especially kid actors. Of course, Disney did use a lot of the same actors over and over again. Yeah. I get the feeling that if he liked working with certain people or thought they worked well, he would just keep reusing them. That's why a lot of those live action films that they made, those comedies, the musicals, those sort of things, there's just a certain look that they all have, and you see a lot of the same actors and actresses popping up again. Mary Poppins, of course, flies in. We reach the part where she first shows up and she flies in. And that's a spectacular special effects shot, in my opinion.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I watched it over again today. I love it. Now, that doesn't exactly happen in the book. It's just, and there isn't that long queue of nannies waiting to get in.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, it's just the children are looking out the window, waiting for their father to come home, and they see someone kind of being blown by the wind. Not out of the sky, but just blown as walking. Figure unlatches the gate, it blows her up to the door, and it's Mary Poppins.
I want to talk a little bit about the special effects. That scene where the nannies are blowing away, I think is really spectacular because this is being done. Obviously, there's wire work involved, but you don't see any wires, and we're not at that stage in special effects where we can just digitally erase them. But those scenes where all the nannies blow away, it's really amazing to look at and just think they had to do this with practical effects.
Yes.
They had no computer digital effects they could rely on, and they're shooting this on a soundstage, obviously. They've built this London street, and it's amazing just to watch them float. They're floating.
They're blowing. They're not floating. They're blowing.
Yeah, they're being blown away, but there's moments where they sort of like float around a bit because the wind is unpredictable.
Yes.
And then they fly off somewhere. But all of it's pretty spectacular. And then, of course, you've got that gorgeous shot with Julie Andrews where she's starting, and the kids are watching it, where she's flying down on the umbrella, or floating down, I guess.
Yes.
And the wind's blowing, and you've got the leaves flying around. But that's really spectacularly done. Obviously done with wire work.
Yes, it's gorgeous. I was really impressed at how well the special effects in this hold up.
They do tremendously well. And that's another thing we should talk about. Once again, I think a lot of younger audiences may not realize how groundbreaking this film was in special effects for its time. 1964, these, and I call them flying sequences, even though they're being blown in by the wind, look flawless.
They do.
They look absolutely flawless. And once again, all done with practical effects. And I know later there's that sequence, the animation live action sequence that combines the two. Disney originally got his start doing live action and animation with the Alice comedies.
That's right.
These black and white silent shorts. And he'd done this before, but when I look at this particular sequence in Mary Poppins, and I look at how it was timed out once again, without the help of computers, and I look at the amount of interplay that's going on, I'm hard-pressed to think of another Disney film that has this level of complexity with a live-action animation combination. I sometimes think about Song of the South, which can't see because you can't get it. You can't watch it. I know that has a certain amount of live-action animation combination, but I don't know if it's as in-depth as this film is.
I've seen Song of the South, and the live-action animated sequences, which are really, really good. And actually, the only reason to watch the film.
Yeah.
It's nothing like this.
Okay.
This is far, far better. One of the things I noticed watching this time is that when they jump into the chalk picture, and there they are in their new clothes to match the colors of the chalk picture, they're dusting off themselves clouds of chalk dust, and the background all looks like a chalk drawing. Later on, gradually, it becomes more like animation. But at first, it looks like they actually are in a chalk drawing. The strokes of the drawing are like that. It was really cool. I hadn't noticed that before. And I saw in a special feature once that it was quite a challenge for the animators to animate animals and things sort of around and behind Dick Van Dyke's legs as they're dancing and prancing. So I admired that very much. Watching it this time.
I'm still very impressed by the sequence because once again, I always think about where they were at technologically at that point, and I think it holds up really well. Another thing about the chalk sequence.
Oh, well, I think I mentioned already that the children were not in the chalk sequence in the book. It was just Mary Poppins on her afternoon off. She and Bert going into the chalk painting, having a delicious tea together, no charge. Because the waiter says it's complimentary. Because
no penguins?
No penguins.
No penguins, okay.
I had heard or read that when Disney was looking at the storyboards for this segment, and they had drawn waiters, in formal attire, he said, waiters always remind me of penguins. So they decided to do penguins.
Yeah, okay.
I love the penguins.
Yeah, the penguins are great.
And I got to say, I love Dick Van Dyke dancing. he's just got such a loose-limbed, wonderful dancing style.
It's funny. Younger audiences aren't going to be that familiar with him, but he does have. I think he's underrated as a talent a lot of times. I've seen him in serious dramas. We also tend to think of him as this guy who plays these really likable, nice characters, but I've seen him do some really despicable characters. I saw a detective drama once where he played a murderer, and he was tremendously effective. And of course there's the old Dick Van Dyke comedy show.
And that's the only place I knew him from when I saw this movie.
And he's been, I keep thinking he's been in other Disney films as well. But he has a real charisma to him. A real on-camera charisma to him. Maybe a lousy British accent.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. When I was a kid, I did not realize what a terrible fake Cockney accent he had. And then when I saw the movie again as an adult with my children, I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this?
Oh, you were a kid.
It was...
I wouldn't have noticed.
It was almost painful. And I don't know why they didn't let him just use his American accent.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have minded.
Because I think some of the characters in this movie are not using British accents.
Yeah, or they are just naturally British.
Yeah, and some are British, yes, but some are not. And Disney does that all the time in its movies.
But anyways, though, you were talking about this. They go out together.
Oh yes, they have tea. And it's just a lovely afternoon out in the countryside. They don't have the fox hunt and they don't have
fantastical elements.
They don't have supercalifragilistic at all. They don't have the race. But when she comes back, the children ask her, what did she do on her afternoon off? And she says, I went to Fairyland. And they said, oh, did you see Robinson Crusoe? Did you see Cinderella? And she says, no. Well, then you couldn't have been in Fairyland. She says, don't you know that everyone has a different Fairyland? Which I guess was kind of something that struck me when I was a little girl.
Oh, well, yeah, I get what that's trying to say. I'm curious that the children think that Robinson Crusoe is somehow fantasy or Fairyland.
Well, he was an imaginary character.
I guess so. I guess he was an imaginary character, but I would hardly call his story one of fantasy and magic.
No, not Fairyland in that sense. But he was an imaginary character that you, as a British child, reading the books at a young age, could have... and Jane in the books has read Robinson Crusoe.
Okay. So I guess
you could play Robinson Crusoe as an imaginary game.
Okay, so then we've of course got the scene where Mary joins the two children in their rooms and helps them clean.
Or makes them clean.
That's it. She makes them clean the room.
That's where we get our spoonful of sugar song.
You were talking about the special effects in this scene here. Go ahead though. You were mentioning to me.
Well, I thought that the most dated special effects were in this segment. Now, not all of it. Well, I suppose to a modern audience, the audio animatronic birds singing on Mary's finger would look, kind of fake.
Yeah.
They didn't to us at that time.
Yeah.
They looked, whoa, really cool.
Yeah.
But they do, in the cleaning the room segment, they do have some, running the film backwards.
Yes.
In the cleanup segments. And doing a little stop motion with the toy soldiers marching up into the toy box.
Yeah.
Those look, a little bit to modern eyes, a little bit antique.
Yeah. But
they're pretty good. And they were just fabulous for the time. Also, I really loved Mary Poppins looking in the mirror.
Yeah. And
when she's singing, and then her reflection sings too. And in fact, adds a little...
harmony.
Yeah, a little show-offy bit at the end.
That's right, and then the Mary Poppins who's not in the mirror actually kind of chastises her for it.
Well, she just remarks, cheeky.
Yes, yeah, basically she chastises her a bit. She chastises herself, her mirror image, I should say, which makes you wonder if maybe the mirror image is a completely different Mary Poppins. Perhaps in an alternate reality.
I don't know. You never can tell with Mary Poppins.
I think about these things. Someone has to. But the one thing about this scene, though, is that there's kind of this contradiction. She tells the children, okay, you have to clean your rooms. She's laying down the law. But then the room kind of cleans itself.
Well, it becomes fun, a game, because of Mary Poppins magical thing. They can just snap their fingers and things, pop back to where they're supposed to be.
So the deep philosophical question I'm asking here is, did the children learn anything?
I think they learned they liked Mary Poppins.
Okay. I don't know if they learned anything about discipline and about the discipline of cleaning your room, though. But
Well,
it was
I don't know.
it was just a weird contradiction that she was so, she was kind of stern with them, and then okay, just here, snap your fingers, sing a song, it's done. I don't know. Anyways, though, I'm making probably much ado about nothing.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
You cut every corner, it is really not so bad. Everybody does it, even mom and dad.
Of course, some of the scenes in that cleaning up the room sequence are primarily used in the Scary Mary parody trailer on YouTube, where a very clever YouTuber created a horror movie version of Mary Poppins as a trailer. Mary Poppins is a horror movie, a trailer. By just changing the music and putting scenes in a different order, it comes off looking like a horror film. And a lot of the room cleaning scenes are in that. The little thing with the clown bobbing up and down, and you put some eerie music behind it, and that scene takes on a whole new meaning.
Oh, yeah. I think they also used the wagon going into the cupboard.
In the cupboard with a little boy inside of it, it's almost like it's eating him up. With the cupboard almost eating him up, that type of thing. Yeah. Anyway, so if you haven't found that on YouTube, go take a look at that when you're done watching this video, but wait until we're done, okay? The other huge special effect moment is the chimney top sequence. I can't stress just how gorgeous this scene looks. Once again, you've got these beautiful matte paintings of London with the smoke from the chimneys. You've got these purplish reddish skies. The choreography is amazing. The dancing is just, I think, mind-blowing, the level of gymnastics in it. And then, of course, there's the incorporation of the special effects. As I watched this sequence, with my mother, who she didn't think she'd ever seen the movie before. As I watched it with her, she started getting scared because they're dancing across rooftops and they're jumping around, and it actually kind of frightened her a little bit. She said, I know it's just a movie, but I keep thinking they're going to fall any second. And that's because when my mother watches a film, she really, really, really gets into it. She's really there when she watches a film, and I feel like I get close to that a lot, but I'm not quite as immersed as she is. I always have a certain amount of separation where I know I'm watching a movie and I'm partly understanding, admiring how things are done, whereas she's completely immersed in it as if it's reality.
Well, you're interested in how things are done. That's why you like to watch special features, and Mom has no interest in that whatsoever.
She has no interest in them at all.
She just likes the story.
But when she's in a film, she's really in it.
But when all of these black, sooty chimney sweeps start popping out of chimneys with smoke and into the air and dancing along these narrow ridges on the rooftops, it's just incredible. I suppose a person could, say, oh, but it stops the movie, but I did not begrudge a single second of it when I was watching.
Yeah, it did occur to me that it stopped the movie cold, this sequence, but I said it's too fun to watch. It's too amazing to look at, this whole dance sequence. I know that a common thing a critique I hear about musicals is that the song should always move the plot forward. It should be integral to the plot and the story. But this is a sequence that really doesn't need to be there. If you took it out, it wouldn't affect the story at all, but it's such an amazing sequence.
But it's another magical segment.
That's true, yeah.
It's another magical segment. It's not magic in the sense of fantasy, except maybe going up a staircase made of smoke.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty fantastical.
That's pretty fantastical. But it has such a magical feeling. Oh, and Dick Van Dyke, when this whole line of chimney sweeps swing him by the arm over the edge of the roof.
Yes, and he defies gravity.
Well, that's pretty magical,
Once again,
I guess.
wire work,
Yeah.
And you can't tell there's any wires there.
No, you can't.
And you can't digitally erase it. How the heck did they do that? How did they get rid of those wires? And I puzzle over these things. I sometimes lose sleep over it. But mostly I just really admire the dancing in this sequence. It is so amazing, the level of athleticism that I see when I watch this. Yeah, it's quite the showstopper. So I guess maybe I should backtrack a little bit and get back to the actual plot line of the story. there's that whole sequence with Uncle Albert, who laughs so hard that he's floating in the air.
Yes.
And if he doesn't stop laughing, he won't come down. And is Uncle Albert in the book?
He certainly is. And he is one of Mary Poppins' relatives.
Okay.
Which...
In the film, I kept wondering, whose uncle is he? Because Bert says it's Uncle Albert. So that kind of implies... That's why I sometimes thought maybe there was that somehow Bert and Mary were related. But, that was the only thing that made me think that was because he talked about Uncle Albert as if he was a family member for both of them.
I think he was just using it as a title.
Okay.
But in the book, Bert doesn't come and tell them. Mary is taking the children to visit her Uncle Albert for tea. Mm-hmm. And when they get there, Uncle Albert is suffering from not laughing gas. Well, if his birthday falls on a Friday, everything seems so funny to him that he fills up with laughing gas and floats up in the air.
Okay, so they explain it in some kind of semi-quasi-scientific way.
It's not really meant to be scientific.
Okay, they explain it better than in the film. Whereas the film, it's just magic.
It's magic in the book too, really.
Okay.
But he just can't help laughing. The thing is that it's catching, and the children think it's funny, so they float up into the air too. And Mary Poppins is very annoyed with them, but they beg her, and the children say, "Please think of something funny so you can come up too." And Uncle Albert says she doesn't have to think of anything funny to do this, and
she could just do it.
So she does it. She goes up, and then she makes the table go up and pours out tea for them. And
so
they
this
have
mirrors
tea.
the film.
Yeah,
in this respect.
In that respect, yes.
I know since I know you don't follow popular music, so I know you're not going to understand what I'm about to talk about too much. I know you know who Paul McCartney is, of course.
Yes, I heard of him.
You've heard of him, yes, of course. I know that because I talk about music so much on my channel, I'm sure that a lot of my viewers will think it's unusual that I actually have family members that don't follow music the way I follow it. But it's because we're all unique in our family, I feel. I feel we're all very unique and different, and I love how unique we all are. But Paul McCartney, of course, best known for the Beatles, being in the Beatles, which you've also heard of. But, of course, you can't help but hear about them because I talk about them incessantly.
Well, I did hear about them back when they were out because they kept playing their music over and over when I was playing chess at the rec center.
And trying to read.
But I did miss out on all of their music because I was reading a book.
Exactly. Time well spent. But at any rate, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Uncle Albert, I didn't notice it when I first saw the movie in the early 2000s, but I did notice it when I watched it again just the other week. Uncle Albert is the name of one of my favorite Paul McCartney songs.
Oh.
And as I watched the film this time around, I kept hearing the song in my head. We're so sorry, Uncle Albert. I'm sure it's not based on Mary Poppins, but I have to wonder if McCartney just was thinking about the film and just used that name because of the film. I've wondered about that since. I know you can't comment on that, but if any of the viewers know anything about that or want to comment on it, I'd be curious to know. But I couldn't help think about that the second time I watched the film. But let's move forward. So there's this whole bit with the bird lady.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love the bird lady sequence.
You're talking about the film, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I like it in the book too.
She's in the book. Okay. And let's talk about that because that's kind of a catalyst for a lot of what happens in the film, which has a through storyline, which the book you say doesn't. Let's talk about some of those differences.
Sure. Well, the bird lady is in the book. She sits on the steps of St. Paul and sells bags of breadcrumbs. And she doesn't say anything that anyone can tell except tuppence a bag. Mm-hmm. And the children look forward to being able to go out there and buy a bag of breadcrumbs and feed the birds. Mm-hmm. And they, in the movie, when the father tells Mary Poppins that children have to learn more about real life and not these silly supercalifragic words and things, and she agrees with him that he's absolutely right, and therefore they will come to work with him tomorrow to the bank.
This is in the film, of course.
This is in the film, but not in the book.
Not in the book, okay.
Not in the book. So we don't have the bird woman being a lead-in to the whole fiasco in the bank. Mm-hmm. The father will not let his son feed the birds.
Yeah.
He wants him to put his tuppence in the bag.
Yeah.
And the bankers all gang up on him and practically snatch his tuppence out of his hands.
Yeah.
And then there's a run on the bank. because the little boy is shouting, "Give me my money! He won't give me my money!" And
we have an economics lesson in this film.
Yes, we do. But all that's happening in the book is Mr. Banks invites his children to come down one afternoon and have tea with him. And they're looking forward to it, and they get to feed the birds before they go. And it's just a very beautiful, almost lyric scene with the birds. And then after they've fed the birds, Michael asks Jane, what happens after all the people leave at night? And she describes this lovely little story about how the birds clean up the square of any loose crumbs. The bird woman, talks to them in the bird language, smooths their feathers. They all flutter around and land on her. And when they're all sleepy, they all crawl under her skirts. And they just sit there till the next morning, sleeping.
So she's kind of a magical character in the book.
Yeah, I guess you could say so. A mythical character. She's, at least that's, Mary Poppins says it's a lot of nonsense and it's not true. But Jane says, yes, it is.
I see.
So it's Jane's story.
Okay. In the film, I think she's turned into kind of a symbol of the charity that you should feel for other people less fortunate than you. That's what I got out of it in the film. And the father seems to feel that I get that the father hasn't learned to recognize that. He feels that's nonsense. You need to put your money away. You need to think of yourself. You need to think about your future, which of course is smart advice. I'm not saying that's not good advice, but he seems to lack charity. And the bird lady seems to represent the charity that you should feel for people less fortunate than you when I watch the film.
She does. And it's not that I think the father dislikes charity. It's that he doesn't recognize the bird woman as anything special.
Okay.
His children do.
I see.
She's special, almost magical, mythical, and all that beautiful, soft focus
in the film. And the song.
With the song. It's really, I just love that. And apparently that was the song that the author liked best.
At some point, we might follow up this video with a discussion of the movie Saving Mr. Banks, reality versus fiction. We might talk about that. But I've actually sat in a room with one of the Sherman brothers once, who wrote the music for this film and for many Disney films.
Yeah.
I sat in a room with one of the Sherman brothers. I think they've passed away now. There's a whole tragic story about the Sherman brothers, how they stopped speaking to each other. And one lives in England, one lives in America. But I sat down with one of the Sherman brothers and got to hear him talk about things. And he talked about Mary Poppins. And he talked a great deal about how difficult P.L. Travers was to deal with.
Yeah, she was.
Perhaps we'll save that for another time if we talk about that film, Saving Mr. Banks, which I think would be a good follow-up to this discussion. But it is interesting to hear that she really liked this particular song.
I believe so. At least, I did read a biography of her. But
yeah.
It's been a while, and I think I recall that.
Okay.
If I'm wrong, someone on the internet will correct us.
Yes, the internet is very good about correcting everybody. So we can be very thankful for that. And before we leave the whole story about the bank incident, the whole economics lesson, I think I should mention Dick Van Dyke's wonderfully humorous performance as the old banker. How shall I describe him? The head of the bank, whatever we want to call him. But he's hysterically funny as this very frail, ancient human being that will fall over if just the wind blows the wrong way on him. And it's interesting because I don't think I noticed that it was Dick Van Dyke the first time I watched it. I don't think I was aware of it. And his performance was so funny. And I realized it the second time I watched it. Did you realize it at first? Or?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
But they do make a special effort in the ending credits to tell you that.
Yes, they do. And I probably didn't catch it the first time. And I understand that Dick Van Dyke is going to be in this sequel.
Oh, really?
I've seen there's an actual shot of him in the trailer with him dancing, actually. And how old is Dick Van Dyke now?
Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I said, he's at that age where when you see him, you say, "How old is he now?" That's what you say when you see someone that old in a movie, and especially when they are dancing in a movie. He looks like the character he played in the original film as the elderly banker. He's got the big beard on and everything, but he's dancing around. He's got the suit and everything, and it almost looks like he's playing the same character. Only now he's probably the age of the character that he portrayed back in 1964, or he's very close to it. It's amazing just to see him around and moving and dancing at whatever age he's at by now, which, I got to imagine he's up there in years. But I'd be curious to know if he's playing the same character or perhaps a different character. Who knows?
Well, I'll have to see the movie for that reason alone.
His character died in the original film.
Yes, he did. Maybe he plays a descendant.
Perhaps he plays, maybe he plays his son or something. Who knows? So I guess we should talk a little bit about the music. Of course, there can't be any music in a book unless there can be songs in a book. But I don't think there's any songs in this book, is there?
Not really.
Okay. But there is the music in this film, and we've discussed a little bit. You discussed, of course, the very beautiful lyrical song with the Bird Lady, which is a beautiful song. There's the beautiful song that Mary sings to the children when they won't go to sleep, when they say they can't go to sleep. And that's a beautiful lullaby. But we also, of course, have these signature songs that I think most of the world knows the moment they hear the opening notes, like, of course, Just a Spoonful of Sugar.
Yeah.
But also, I think, Chim Chimney.
Yes. Yeah, that's...
Which everybody knows, as everybody knows, Jimmy Page stole Chim Chimney, Chim Chim Cheroo when he wrote Stairway to Heaven for Led Zeppelin. Everybody knows that. I know you're looking at me very perplexed right now because you don't follow any popular music, but hopefully YouTube is laughing at that remark. But yeah, Chim Chimney, Chim Chim Cheroo, which is a very haunting song, in my opinion.
It's beautiful, and they use it in different parts of the movie, not just in the chimney sweep section. That
is right, they do. They use it very early on in the film, I believe. And but I've always found that as a child, we used to have a Disney record when I was a kid. Of course, most families did. Mm-hmm. And we had just different songs from Disney movies on it. And of course, Chim Chimney, Chim Cheroo always kind of struck out to me as a little kid because I didn't really know what he was talking about. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of it was the accent. Mm-hmm. But it always struck me as a little kid as kind of a haunting song.
Yes.
And there was a dark mystique to it, even though I don't think it's intentional. But when you're a little kid, I used to find Toll of the Bells to be almost frightening to listen to as a little boy. But I loved it. Mm-hmm. I loved that it sent shivers down my spine and scared me a little bit. I almost felt like it came from a horror movie. That it wasn't really a Christmas song, that it was from a horror film. But even though I hadn't seen a horror film yet at that age, when I was a small boy, but the song scared me in a wonderful way. I still love it. Chim Chimney, Chim Chim Cheroo has always had this very mystical quality to me. And this comes from childhood because I didn't understand what it was as a small child. It just had this very haunting feel. And it's always kind of stayed with me ever since. And I'll never be able to listen to it without feeling that way about it. Anyway, sorry, I just had to take a little musical aside.
No, I wanted to ask you about some of the music in this and get your take on it. I was noticing the music more than I usually do when I watched the movie this time, and where they reused different pieces of music, like the father's music when he first enters the movie, singing about how great it is to be an Englishman in 1910. He sings that, or we hear it played in the background at various parts of the movie. For instance, when he's telling Mary Poppins the children have to learn about real life, and she agrees and sings in the same tune that they'll go with him to work tomorrow, much to his surprise.
Once again, turning the tables on him.
Right.
And making him think it's his idea.
That tune is used again by Bert when he's singing to the father after all the chimney sweeps have, brought chaos into their house as they exit from the rooftops. Yeah. His whole world has fallen apart because he's, had his decommissioning at the bank. Yeah. They've torn his flower and everything.
Yeah, they're pretty brutal to him in that sequence.
It's a brutal scene.
None of that's in the book.
No, that whole subplot is not in the book at all. It's part of Disney's, we've got to fix this dysfunctional family. Yeah. But Bert is singing to him and agreeing with him about how, you're busy, you don't have time to wipe away your little kid's tears and to pay attention to them. And that's the same tune, I think, correct me, where the father is singing about a man has dreams when he's, feeling very broken. Mm-hmm. So that tune has gone all the way through the movie and done different things, which I'm not a musical person, but it really struck me strongly.
Well, that's of course common in most movie soundtracks and in most musicals, where certain musical themes are created for certain characters, and there'll be variations on those themes when there's an important moment for that character in the story of the film. You'll hear either that same theme or a variation of it to signify that. And sometimes it's very subtle and subconscious. We don't always notice it when we're watching movies. It's something that when I started playing piano, learning how to play piano when I was a teenager, I started becoming more and more aware of, as I sat in theaters and watched movies, hearing certain themes. Oh yeah, there's Princess Leia's theme again, and she's about to do something, where she's about to have a moment here in this film. That's just a thing that's very common in films, but I'm glad you've noticed it. I'm glad you picked up on it. But yes, you're right. You're right. And all good musicals tend to do that.
And I, of course, love the Sisters Suffragette segment.
Yes, yes.
One of my favorites.
Yes. I love how the mother almost treats the whole movement like it's almost a party at times.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, even though it's a very serious thing. Of course, the other piece of music we should talk about is, of course, the song that closes the movie, Let's Go Fly a Kite.
Oh, I always get goose pimples when I hear it at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I feel that certain lump in my throat because it's this moment where Mr. Banks, the father, who like I said, so absorbed in his work, he's not paying attention to his kids, where suddenly he realizes the error of his ways, and he has this moment where he grows. And he becomes a better person.
He realizes what's the most important thing to focus on.
Exactly.
It's and the mother joins in.
Yeah.
She has her suffragette ribbon, which becomes the tail of their kite. He's mended their children's kite. They're going to go off and fly a kite as a family, and they don't even notice that Mary Poppins is leaving.
Yeah.
And that is a real change in the book. I mean, the adults are just annoyed that Mary Poppins leaves without, so much as giving notice. But the children are devastated. And the children haven't noticed, which in Disney's world is the right thing. They have their parents back again. The family has healed. Mary Poppins has done her job. There's a bittersweet feeling during this Let's Fly a Kite. They don't need her anymore. She's done her job.
She has that moment, and this is one of those subtle things. All throughout the film, she has that umbrella with the little bird's head on it.
The parrot head.
And the parrot head, at the end of the film, the parrot head just starts to talk to her like it's always known her for years. And it waits until the end of the film to suddenly say something to her, which I think is wonderful, and says, "But aren't you going to miss them?" And and there's this melancholy to her, and she's trying hard to not let her emotions overcome her. And I think she says something to the effect, well, if I let my emotions overtake me, I would hardly be less than nearly perfect, now would I? Or something like that.
I think she says, if I missed every child I took care of.
Exactly, that's the line.
Something to that effect.
I would not be nearly perfect. Because there's that sequence where she measures the children with the yardstick.
Yes.
And, the measurement tells their personality traits. And when they tell her to measure herself, I think it says practically perfect or something like that. Yes.
And that's in the book too.
Yeah, and so that's the line she says, well, when you're practically, you're right. If I missed every child, I wouldn't be practically perfect, now would I? And she's trying very hard to hold back her emotions at that point.
Yeah.
But I think the song is a beautiful song. And I think it has extra resonance for me. Because I got to listen to one of the Sherman Brothers talk about writing these songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, when I got to sit in a room. And I'll give some background here. It's not like I know who this person, but I was a voting member of the Grammy Awards for a while there, and there were always a number of Grammy events, and one of them was a very intimate audience with one of the Sherman Brothers, and a moderator, him talking about his career in music, writing songs, and there was, of course, question and answer period from the audience where we got to ask them questions. So to me, that song has a certain resonance because of hearing him talk about the writing of that song. And also, even though the film, Saving Mr. Banks, we'll talk about that at a later time perhaps, about the reality versus fiction. But the whole way that song plays into that movie, along with this film, adds a certain resonance for me too, as well, which I know is really complicated. But and like I said, but I don't want to talk too much about that film. That's the movie about the making of Mary Poppins. And about, well, we won't get into it too much because I know we've got a whole discussion there about fiction versus reality.
Well, getting back to the differences between the movie and the book, I did want to say that the children are very upset when Mary Poppins leaves, whereas in the movie they hardly notice that she's leaving. I wrote down a few quotes when I was rereading it recently. Michael, it says, "Mary Poppins is the only person I want in the world," Michael wailed and flung himself on the floor. Because Mary Poppins leaves just unexpectedly. Well, she's kind of nice to them before they leave. She gives Jane and Michael each a present, which is unheard of. And the mother, is very put out because, she has to go out to dinner tonight and they've got all these things coming up and they have no nanny, and she says she wouldn't have Mary Poppins back even if she returned. She's so annoyed. And Michael says, "You are a very cruel woman," clenching his fist as though at any minute he would have to strike her.
I can see why that would not play as well in a Disney film.
No.
Certainly not a Disney film from this time period.
The thing that does give the children hope is that they find a note under Jane's pillow, in which she gives, it's with a little miniature painting of Mary Poppins. And she says, "You get this because Michael got the compass." And it says, "Au revoir." And they don't know what au revoir means. And they ask the cook, and she says it means until next time or until I see you again.
Oh, okay.
And then Michael gives a long sigh of relief and he says, "That's all right," he said shakily. "She always does what she says she will." And that line really struck me because it is very important to children to have that in an adult. To have an adult in their world who does what he or she says they will do.
Yeah, I agree. You need that reassuring figure in your life when you're a child.
And I take it from literature that nannies were very important people to a child because for a certain portion of their life in Britain, in the upper class, you saw your nanny more than you saw your parents, and she basically brought you up in the early stages.
Yeah, it's to me,
it's alien.
You're right. I know, and I've read this too. But to me, it's so alien sounding. It's like it's so culturally different from what I know, and I just think, why would you? How could you allow that to happen? But it seems like a lot of children from that time period were raised reasonably well and became reasonable people, reasonable adults, and generally did good things with their lives, from what I can gather. Yeah. I've certainly seen plenty of people who are raised by families who could have done worse, I guess. Who knows?
Another thing I should mention just before we wrap up is that a lot of characters were left out of the movie, which happens because, it's cheaper. Jane and Michael had two younger siblings, John and Barbara, who were twins, and they're toddlers in the first book. And then they also have, I forget if it's at the end of the first book or maybe it's in the second book, they get a new baby sister.
Oh, wow.
Probably just for focus and cost cutting, they were not in the movie. And another thing I thought I'd mention is that there are characters from the book who make a very brief cameo. I mentioned Mrs. Corey and her tall daughter. So there was also Miss Lark, who's in that opening segment with Bert and his one-man band with her little dog. Yeah. And they are bigger characters in the book.
I think it'll be interesting when the new movie comes out, which is in less than a month. The new movie's coming out. A sequel. It is a sequel. And obviously, clearly a sequel to this original film.
To the film.
Yes.
Nothing to do with the books, though.
I'm wondering, though, how much they will incorporate. It might be interesting to see how much they incorporate from the other books. They might still incorporate things from it and put that in this film. It might be interesting to take note of that. So one other thing I think we should mention in closing is this is the last film from Disney where Walt Disney himself was overseeing it.
You mean majorly involved?
Majorly involved, yeah. I mean, sure, you're right. Some films he was, more hands-off. But this is the last film where he was, had a serious hand in the production of it and was looking over it very carefully. It was an important film to him. And he died a couple years, not too long after it, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure of the chronology.
Yeah,
but,
it was not too long after this film, but this was the last film where he had a major hand. You can kind of trace this decline in the quality of their films and a reliance on a certain formula.
Well, I think Disney was willing to take chances.
Yeah.
And that's something that a committee can't do.
That's right. They can't.
And there was some hope, I think, for a while, at least on the part of the author, Travers, that there might be a sequel. She had mixed feelings. Well, she had negative feelings about the film. She sent like telegrams or letters with saying nice things to the Disney studios about the movie, but she kept copies for herself on which she penciled negative remarks. And the biography I read, the author says that she kind of hoped, she didn't want to antagonize Disney while there was a chance of a sequel. But when it became clear that there wasn't going to be a sequel, then she began speaking more negatively about her reaction to the film.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
We should talk about that more if we do a follow-up. We might do a follow-up to this video where we discuss the movie Saving Mr. Banks and we discuss reality versus fiction.
No, I didn't like that movie very much.
I like the movie a lot, although I know it's not historically accurate. Perhaps we'll talk about that in a future video.
One thing I did want to say, since this is a talk about the difference between book and movie, I know a lot of people are really down on Disney versions of books. I have to say that sometimes as a kid, I would see a Disney movie and it would lead me to a book. And it would be a wonderful experience. I saw, in sixth grade, I saw Sword in the Stone. And I enjoyed the movie as a kid. It's not that great a movie, but I enjoyed it a lot. And I managed to see in the title that it was from a book. So I hunted up the book and I was amazed. It was one of the most wonderful books I had ever read. And I guess maybe sometimes I get upset if a book is too far from or antithetical to the book. If the movie is antithetical to the book version. But sometimes I just can think of them as different objects.
Two separate things. And Mary Poppins, which I think is one of Disney's masterpieces, is one of those movies. So on that note, I think we're going to say goodbye. Everybody, if you've ever read the books and you want to discuss your own comparisons, please leave comments for everybody and for us to check out. Let us know your thoughts. And we're considering maybe talking about the new movie when it comes out and discussing comparisons between the new film and this film. And let us know if you'd like to see us do that. And be sure to click like and subscribe. Be sure to click the notifications icon. And if you want to help me make more videos like this and like the kind I do on this channel, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Pledging just $1 a month, pledging just the cost of a cup of coffee a month can make a huge difference and can really help me to increase production on videos like this. And so please consider that. And thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.